Imagine this, you're pregnant with your dream child, living in luxury with a millionaire husband who seems perfect, until you discover he's not just cheating, he's plotting to steal your future, destroy your life, and disappear with his ruthless mistress. But what if the betrayed wife rises like a phoenix, exposing a criminal empire, battling deadly threats, and claiming ultimate victory full of heart-pounding twists, revenge, and empowerment? Betrayed, a millionaire's pregnant wife's journey from heartbreak to triumph will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't believe the shocking ending. Stay tuned for the full story. If this hooked you, smash that like button if you're team revenge. Comment your biggest plot twist prediction, share with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe for more epic tales like this. Let's get into it. Sarah Matthews pressed her hand against her growing belly as she lay on the ultrasound table, her heart racing with excitement. At 20 weeks pregnant, this appointment would reveal whether she and David were having a boy or girl. The gel felt cold against her skin, but nothing could dampen her joy. "There's your baby," Dr. Rodriguez said with a warm smile, pointing to the screen. "Everything looks perfect. Would you like to know the gender?" Sarah nodded eagerly, already reaching for her phone to text David. He'd promised to be here, but an urgent business meeting had kept him away. Again. "Congratulations, Mrs. Matthews. You're having a beautiful baby girl." Tears of happiness streamed down Sarah's face as she stared at the tiny profile on the screen. A daughter. She quickly typed a message to David. "It's a girl. Our little princess is perfect. I love you so much." The message showed as delivered, but no response came. Meanwhile, 15 miles away in his glass-walled executive office overlooking downtown Seattle, David Matthews had his phone face down on his mahogany desk. He was too busy with Elena Torres straddled across his lap, her designer skirt hiked up, her lips pressed against his neck. "God, I've missed you," Elena whispered, her accent adding an exotic flavor to her words. At 29, she was everything Sarah wasn't anymore: young, ambitious, and hungry for the lifestyle David's millions could provide. David's hands gripped Elena's waist as she moved against him. "Sarah's at her appointment?" he muttered. "We have an hour." Elena smiled wickedly, reaching for the leather belt she'd left on his desk, a Hermes piece worth more than most people's monthly salary. "Then we better not waste it." Back at the medical center, Sarah clutched the sonogram photos as she drove home through the afternoon Seattle rain. Their $3 million mansion in Bellevue sat on 2 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, a testament to David's success in the tech industry. She'd given up her promising marketing career 5 years ago to support his dreams, and now they were living the life she'd always imagined. Sarah pulled into their circular driveway, parking next to David's Tesla. Strange, his car was here, but he'd said he was in meetings all day. Maybe he'd come home early to hear about the appointment. She found the house empty. David's home office door closed. Through the window, she could see him on a video call, gesturing animatedly. Sarah decided not to interrupt, instead heading to the kitchen to prepare his favorite dinner: herb-crusted salmon with asparagus risotto. As she cooked, Sarah practiced how she'd announce the news. "David, meet your daughter," she whispered to herself, holding up the sonogram photo. "Our little girl who's going to change everything." The front door opened around 7 p.m., and David walked in looking disheveled, his usually perfect hair mussed. "Sorry I'm late," he said, barely glancing at Sarah as he headed straight for the bar cart. "Meetings ran long." "How was your day?" Sarah asked, watching him pour a generous glass of whiskey. "I have something exciting to tell you." David's phone buzzed. He checked it immediately, a small smile playing at his lips as he typed a response. Oh, fine. Just the usual business stuff." Sarah bit her lip, hurt by his distraction. "David, could you put the phone down for a minute? I went to the doctor today. Remember?" Right. He set the phone face down, but his fingers drummed restlessly on the granite countertop. "Everything okay with the baby?" "More than okay." Sarah pulled out the sonogram photos, her voice filled with joy. "We're having a daughter, David, a little girl." For a moment, David's face softened. He looked at the fuzzy black and white image, and Sarah saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. A daughter, he repeated quietly. I was thinking we could start on the nursery this weekend, Sarah continued, moving closer to him. Maybe that soft yellow we looked at, or we could do pink now that we know. David's phone buzzed again. This time, the sound seemed to snap him back to reality. He reached for it instinctively. David, please. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. This is important. We're talking about our daughter. I know. It's just, Elena's having issues with the Morrison account. I might need to go back to the office. Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Elena Torres, David's brilliant and beautiful business partner, seemed to have a crisis every evening lately. Can't it wait until tomorrow? We're supposed to have dinner together. I made your favorite. David glanced at the elaborate meal Sarah had prepared, then back at his phone. Look, we'll talk about baby names and nursery colors tomorrow. Okay, this deal is worth millions. Ekernoy, he kissed Sarah's forehead absently and headed toward the door. Don't wait up. Sarah stood alone in their kitchen, surrounded by the dinner she'd spent hours preparing, holding the sonogram photos of their daughter. Through the window, she watched David's car disappear into the Seattle evening, and for the first time in their marriage, she felt truly invisible. Later that night, Sarah sat in their master bedroom, rain pattering against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights blurred through the water droplets, creating a kaleidoscope effect that matched her fragmented emotions. She held the sonogram photo close to her chest, talking softly to her unborn daughter. Your daddy's just busy building our future, she whispered, one hand on her belly. He loves us. He's just stressed. But doubt crept in like the cold Seattle air through the windows. When had David stopped looking at her the way he used to? When had his touch become perfunctory? His kisses mere obligations? Sarah caught her reflection in the bedroom mirror, her face puffy from pregnancy, her body changing in ways that made her feel foreign to herself. At 38, she sometimes wondered if David saw her as the vibrant marketing executive he'd married, or just another responsibility weighing him down. David didn't come home until after midnight. Sarah pretended to be asleep as he slipped into bed, reeking of expensive perfume that definitely wasn't hers. The next morning, while David showered, his phone rang on the nightstand. Sarah glanced at it and saw Elena's name on the screen. Without thinking, she answered. David. Elena's sultry voice purred through the speaker. Baby, I can't wait to feel your hands on me again tonight. Yesterday was incredible, but I need more of you. Sarah's world stopped. The phone slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering to the floor as Elena's voice continued. David, are you there? I'm already wet just thinking about what you did to me on your desk. The bathroom door opened, and David emerged in a towel, water still dripping from his hair. He saw Sarah's pale face, the phone on the floor, and his expression shifted from confusion to panic. Sarah, I can explain. But Sarah was already running to the bathroom, her pregnant body heaving as morning sickness mixed with the devastating realization that her perfect life was nothing but an illusion. The sound of Elena's laughter echoed from the fallen phone, and Sarah knew that everything she'd believed about her marriage, her future, and her worth as a woman was about to be destroyed. Sarah gripped the marble bathroom sink, her knuckles white as she stared at her reflection. Her face was ashen, dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night replaying Elena's words over and over. Baby, I can't wait to feel your hands on me again tonight. David appeared in the doorway, fully dressed in his usual crisp business suit, his expression carefully composed. Sarah, we need to talk about last night. Last night, Sarah turned to face him, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the storm raging inside her. You mean when I answered your phone and heard your business partner talking about your hands on her body? David's jaw tightened. Elena can be inappropriate. She's Latina, very passionate about everything. Sometimes she doesn't understand professional boundaries. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. Professional boundaries, David. She called you baby. She talked about getting wet thinking about you. Look, I know how it sounded, but your pregnancy hormones are making you paranoid. David stepped closer, his voice taking on the patronizing tone that had become all too familiar. Elena is my business partner. We're working on the biggest deal of my career. Yes, she's attractive, and yes, she can be flirtatious, but that's just her personality. Her personality, Sarah's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. What about the perfume on your clothes, the late nights, the way you barely look at me anymore? David sighed heavily, as if Sarah was being unreasonable. I'm building an empire. Sarah, everything I do is for our family, for our future. If you can't handle the pressure of success, maybe you should talk to someone. Professional help. The suggestion hit Sarah like a slap. David was already rewriting reality, making her the problem. She watched him check his Rolex, the same watch she'd given him for their 5th anniversary. I have to go, he said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. We'll discuss this tonight when you're feeling more rational. After David left, Sarah sat on their king-size bed, surrounded by luxury that suddenly felt suffocating. The walls of their mansion seemed to close in as doubt and fear battled with 5 years of love and devotion. Maybe David was right. Maybe pregnancy hormones were making her paranoid. But Elena's voice kept echoing in her mind, full of intimate familiarity that no business relationship could explain. Sarah made a decision that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. She called Jennifer, her younger sister, a single mother who worked as a paralegal in downtown Seattle. Jen, I need the name of a good private investigator. Sarah, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Sarah's voice broke as she explained about the phone call, David's explanation, and her growing suspicions. Jennifer listened without judgment, her protective instincts kicking in. Honey, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I know someone discreet and professional. Marcus Chen. He's handled cases like this before. That afternoon, Sarah met Marcus Chen at a small cafe in Capitol Hill, far from David's usual haunts. Marcus was in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put Sarah at ease despite the awkward circumstances. Mrs. Matthews, I want you to understand that once we start this investigation, we might uncover things you're not prepared to see, Marcus said carefully. Are you sure you want to proceed? Sarah placed her hands on her growing belly, thinking of her daughter's future. I need to know the truth, Marcus nodded. I'll need access to financial records, David's schedule, and any passwords you might have. We'll start with surveillance and see what develops. While Marcus began his investigation, Sarah tried to maintain normalcy at home. She attended prenatal yoga classes, decorated the nursery, and prepared elaborate dinners that David barely touched. He came home later each night, always with explanations about important meetings and urgent deadlines. 3 days after hiring Marcus, Sarah was organizing David's home office when she found a receipt that had fallen behind his desk. It was from Nordstrom, a $1,000 charge for women's lingerie, size small. Sarah wore large now, thanks to her pregnancy. Her hands shook as she photographed the receipt. This wasn't paranoia or pregnancy hormones. This was evidence. That evening, David announced he needed to have Elena over for a business dinner to finalize the Morrison account. She'll be here around 7. I know it's last minute, but this deal could set us up for life. Sarah spent the afternoon preparing for Elena's arrival, her emotions a mixture of dread and determination. She chose her outfit carefully, a flowing maternity dress that accentuated her pregnancy rather than hiding it, a subtle reminder of what was at stake. Elena arrived precisely at 7, stunning in a way that made Sarah feel frumpy and invisible. She wore a black designer dress that hugged her curves, and around her waist was a leather belt that Sarah recognized with a jolt of recognition, the same belt she'd found in David's car weeks ago. Sarah! Elena exclaimed with false warmth, air kissing both of Sarah's cheeks. You look, well, pregnancy suits you. The compliment felt like an insult wrapped in politeness. Elena's eyes swept over Sarah's changed body with barely concealed satisfaction, as if cataloging all the ways Sarah no longer measured up to her former self. During dinner, Sarah watched Elena work her magic. She touched David's hand while discussing profit margins, laughed at his jokes with genuine delight, and made subtle references to shared experiences that excluded Sarah entirely. "Remember that client dinner in Portland last month?" Elena said, her fingers trailing along David's forearm. "We were up until 3 a.m. working on the presentation." Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. David had told her he was alone on that business trip. "Elena's a perfectionist," David explained, not meeting Sarah's eyes. "She won't settle for anything less than excellence." "I know what I want, and I take it," Elena replied, her gaze moving between David and Sarah with predatory satisfaction. After Elena left, Sarah confronted David about the Portland trip. "You said you were alone. Why didn't you mention Elena was there?" David's expression hardened. "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Elena is my business partner. Sarah, we traveled together for work. It's completely normal." "What about the lingerie receipt size small?" "David, I haven't worn a size small since high school." David's face went pale, then red with anger. "You went through my things. You're spying on me now? I'm trying to understand why my husband is buying expensive lingerie for someone who isn't his pregnant wife. It was a gift for a client's wife, part of building relationships." "God, Sarah, you've become so suspicious and controlling. This isn't the woman I married." The words hit their mark. Sarah felt herself shrinking, wondering if she really had become the paranoid, jealous wife David was describing. Maybe she was losing her mind. Maybe pregnancy had changed her in ways that made her unrecognizable even to herself. That night, David seemed to sense her vulnerability. He pulled her close in bed, his hands gentle on her swollen belly. "I'm sorry I snapped at you today. The pressure's been getting to me, too. Let's go away this weekend, just the two of us. Remember that bed and breakfast in Napa Valley you loved?" Hope bloomed in Sarah's chest. Maybe this was the sign she'd been waiting for. Maybe David was ready to fight for their marriage. "Really, you'd take time off work? For you and our daughter, of course." He kissed her neck softly. "I'll cut back on business with Elena, too. I can see how it's affecting you." Sarah melted into his embrace, relief flooding through her. She'd been wrong. David loved her. They could work through this rough patch and emerge stronger. 2 days later, they drove to Napa Valley in David's Tesla, Sarah's hand resting on her belly as she watched the vineyards roll past. For the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful about their future. The bed and breakfast was as romantic as she remembered, a Victorian mansion surrounded by rolling hills and endless rows of grapevines. David seemed relaxed, attentive, more like his old self. They walked through the vineyards at sunset, his arm around her shoulders as they talked about baby names and nursery decorations. That night, they made love for the first time in months. David was gentle and reverent, his hands tracing her changing body with something that felt like worship. "I love you, Sarah," he whispered against her skin. "I love our family." Sarah fell asleep feeling like her prayers had been answered. She woke at 3 a.m. to severe cramping in her lower abdomen. Panic shot through her as she shook David awake. "Something's wrong. The baby." The drive to the nearest hospital was a blur of pain and terror. In the emergency room, David held her hand as doctors performed an ultrasound, checking for signs of miscarriage or premature labor. "Mrs. Matthews, your baby is fine," Dr. Patel assured her, "but your stress levels are dangerously elevated. Are you experiencing unusual anxiety or emotional trauma?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I've been worried about my marriage, suspecting my husband of things." Dr. Patel's expression grew serious. "Stress during pregnancy can have serious consequences for both you and your baby. You need to find ways to manage your anxiety, whether through counseling, support groups, or removing stressors from your environment." Throughout the doctor's explanation, David's phone buzzed constantly. He tried to ignore it at first, but the persistent notifications clearly agitated him. Finally, Sarah saw him glance at the screen, and his face changed. "I need to check this," he muttered, stepping into the hallway. Through the hospital room window, Sarah watched David pacing as he typed frantically on his phone. Even in her moment of crisis, he couldn't ignore Elena's messages. When he returned, Dr. Patel was explaining the need for bed rest and stress reduction. Your wife needs complete support and minimal anxiety for the remainder of her pregnancy. David nodded seriously, playing the concerned husband perfectly. But Sarah had seen something else in his eyes when he looked at his phone. Relief. Almost as if this medical emergency was an inconvenience he needed to manage, rather than a genuine crisis involving his wife and unborn child. Later, as they drove back to the bed and breakfast, Sarah caught a glimpse of David's phone screen when it lit up with a notification. The message preview made her blood run cold. Can't wait to be free from this nightmare. The sender was Elena. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. While she'd been fighting for their baby's life in the emergency room, David had been texting his mistress about being free from this nightmare. Was the nightmare their marriage? Their baby Sarah herself, all the hope that had bloomed during their romantic weekend, withered and died. David wasn't choosing their family over Elena. He was simply better at hiding his true feelings. As they pulled into the bed and breakfast parking lot, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was done being the paranoid, emotional pregnant wife that David could dismiss and manipulate. It was time to discover exactly how deep his betrayal went. The next morning, while David slept off the stress of the hospital visit, Sarah called Marcus Chen. I need you to accelerate the investigation. And I need to know everything about Elena Torres, her background, her history, everything. I have a feeling this affair is just the beginning. Marcus's voice was grim. Mrs. Matthews, I've already uncovered some concerning financial irregularities. Are you prepared for the possibility that this goes beyond infidelity? Sarah looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her hand on her growing belly. Her daughter deserved better than a father who saw her as a nightmare to escape. Find everything. I'm done being naive. Sarah stared at the hospital ceiling, counting the small holes in the acoustic tiles to distract herself from the cramping in her abdomen. The medications had helped, but Dr. Patel wanted to monitor her for another few hours to ensure the baby was stable. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She expected to see a nurse, but instead, Elena Torres glided into the room carrying an enormous bouquet of white lilies, funeral flowers, Sarah realized with a chill. Sarah, querida, I came as soon as I heard. Elena's voice dripped with false concern as she set the flowers on the bedside table. David called me from the road. He was so worried about you and the baby. David had called Elena while driving Sarah to the emergency room. Sarah's stomach churned, though she couldn't tell if it was from the medication or the realization that her husband's first instinct during their crisis had been to contact his mistress. How thoughtful of you to visit, Sarah managed, her voice carefully neutral. Elena pulled a chair close to the bed, her movements graceful and predatory. Today she wore a cream-colored silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's car payments, paired with the same leather belt Sarah had found in David's car. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you look exhausted, mi amor. Being pregnant is so difficult, especially at your age. Elena's smile was sugar-sweet poison. I admire women who choose motherhood later in life. It's so brave. At your age, Sarah was only 38, but Elena made it sound ancient. David and I are thrilled about our daughter. Oh, David told me all about the ultrasound. He was so excited. Elena leaned forward conspiratorially. Though between us, I think he's a little nervous about becoming a father. He's mentioned how much responsibility it is, how it will change everything. Each word was a carefully placed dagger. Elena was sharing intimate conversations that should have been private between husband and wife, marking her territory with surgical precision. David loves children, Sarah said weakly. Of course he does. In theory. Elena's laugh was musical and cruel. But David is such a free spirit. You know he needs adventure, excitement. All those late nights we spend working on projects, brainstorming, letting our creativity flow. She paused meaningfully. Sometimes we don't even realize how late it's gotten until we see the sunrise. Sarah's heart pounded. Elena was describing overnight dates disguised as work sessions, and she was doing it with Sarah lying helpless in a hospital bed, fighting to save her pregnancy. David's very dedicated to his business, Sarah said through gritted teeth. Oh yes, very dedicated. To many things. Elena's eyes glittered with satisfaction. I hope you know how lucky you are, Sarah. David could have any woman he wants. Young, successful, unburdened by domestic responsibilities. But he chose to honor his commitments to you. Honor his commitments. Not love, not desire, not even affection. Commitments. As if Sarah was a business obligation David was too decent to abandon. Where is David now? Sarah asked, needing to change the subject before she said something she'd regret. Oh, he had to run back to the office. Some crisis with the Morrison account that only he could handle. You know how indispensable he is. Elena stood, smoothing her skirt. But don't worry, I'll take excellent care of him while you're recovering. David needs someone who understands the demands of his work. After Elena left, Sarah called Jennifer with shaking hands. She was here, in my hospital room. And Jen, the things she said. What kind of psychopath visits someone in the hospital to threaten them? Jennifer's voice was furious. I'm coming to get you. You shouldn't be alone right now. An hour later, Jennifer burst through the hospital room door like an avenging angel. At 45, she was 5 years younger than Sarah but infinitely more street smart. Her divorce 3 years earlier had taught her to recognize manipulation and emotional abuse from a mile away. Okay, tell me everything this bitch said, Jennifer demanded, settling into the chair Elena had vacated. Sarah recounted the conversation, watching her sister's expression grow darker with each detail. Jennifer had always been protective, but now she looked ready to commit murder. Sarah, honey, that woman didn't come here to check on you. She came to mark her territory and deliver a message. She wanted you to know that she has access to David in ways you don't, especially now that you're pregnant and vulnerable. But maybe she's just trying to be supportive in her own way. Stop. Jennifer's voice was sharp. Stop making excuses for people who are hurting you. I've been where you are. Remember making excuses, explaining away red flags, telling myself that my husband's emotional affair was just friendship. Sarah fell silent. Jennifer's ex-husband had eventually left her for his just-a-friend co-worker, taking half their assets and abandoning their 8-year-old daughter. What did your private investigator find? Jennifer asked. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to Marcus's latest text. Surveillance confirms subject and Elena Torres engaged in intimate relationship. Multiple hotels, restaurants, overnight business trips together. Financial analysis reveals concerning patterns. Need to meet ASAP. He wants to meet tomorrow. Says there are concerning financial patterns. Jennifer's face went pale. Sarah, if David's moving money around during your marriage, that could affect your rights in a divorce. You need to protect yourself and your daughter. The word divorce hit Sarah like a physical blow. Even with all the evidence mounting, part of her still hoped this was all a terrible misunderstanding that could be resolved. I can't think about divorce right now. I'm 22 weeks pregnant with his child. Which is exactly why you need to think about it, Jennifer said firmly. Pregnancy makes you vulnerable in so many ways. Financially, emotionally, legally. If David's planning to leave you, you need to know before you're holding a newborn with no resources or support. That evening, David returned to the hospital with apologies and takeout from Sarah's favorite Thai restaurant. He seemed genuinely concerned about her health, asking detailed questions about the doctor's recommendations and promising to reduce his work stress. I've been thinking about what Dr. Patel said, he told Sarah as she picked at her pad thai. Maybe we should hire a housekeeper, someone to help you during the last trimester. You shouldn't be doing so much physical work. Sarah was touched despite her suspicions. That's thoughtful, but we've always managed fine with just us. Things are different now. We have more money, and you're carrying our daughter. I want to take care of both of you. David reached for her hand, his touch warm and familiar. I know I've been distracted lately with work, But I promise that's going to change. Family comes first. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to believe him. This was the David she'd fallen in love with. Attentive, caring, devoted to their future together. Maybe Elena was just an ambitious employee with poor boundaries. Maybe Sarah really had been letting pregnancy hormones cloud her judgment. But then David's phone buzzed, and she saw him glance at it reflexively. The spell broke. "Is that work?" she asked. "Just Elena confirming tomorrow's meeting with Morrison? Nothing urgent." But David had already pulled the phone closer to his body, shielding the screen from Sarah's view. The next morning, Sarah was discharged with strict instructions for bed rest and stress management. David helped her into the car with exaggerated care, but she noticed him checking his phone constantly during the drive home. "Do you need to go to the office?" she asked as they pulled into their driveway. "Maybe for a few hours, just to check on things." David carried her overnight bag to the door. "Will you be okay? I could ask Jennifer to stay with you." Sarah shook her head. "I'm fine, just tired." After David left, Sarah sat in their living room surrounded by the trappings of their perfect life. Original artwork, designer furniture, fresh flowers arranged by their weekly service. Everything looked the same, but it all felt hollow now, like props on a stage set. Her phone rang. "Marcus Chen. Mrs. Matthews, we need to meet today. I've discovered some things about your husband's business practices and his relationship with Ms. Torres that you need to know immediately." "What kind of things?" "The kind that could impact your financial security and your daughter's future." "Can you meet me at my office this afternoon?" Sarah looked around her beautiful prison of a home. "I'll be there." Marcus's office was in a modest building in Fremont, far from the gleaming skyscrapers where David conducted his business. The contrast wasn't lost on Sarah as she sat across from the private investigator, waiting to learn just how thoroughly her life had been built on lies. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm going to be direct because time may be a factor here." Marcus spread photographs across his desk, images of David and Elena at romantic restaurants, entering hotel rooms, embracing in ways that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "The affair is confirmed, but that's not the worst of it." Marcus pulled out a thick folder. "Your husband has been systematically moving marital assets into accounts that Elena Torres has access to. In some cases, she's listed as a co-owner." Sarah stared at the bank statements, seeing her own signature forged on documents transferring money to accounts she'd never heard of. "This is fraud." "Yes, it is. But there's more." Marcus's expression was grim. "I ran a background check on Elena Torres. Her real name is Elena Vasquez, and she has a history of targeting wealthy married men. This is her third time working this particular con." Sarah's hands shook as Marcus showed her newspaper clippings about Elena's previous victims. A real estate developer in Phoenix who'd lost his house and business. A tech executive in San Francisco who'd ended up declaring bankruptcy. She finds successful men going through midlife transitions, becomes their business partner or employee, initiates affairs, then systematically drains their assets while destroying their marriages. Marcus explained, "The pattern is always the same." "Does David know about her history?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Matthews, I have evidence suggesting that David not only knows about Elena's background, but may be working with her to hide assets from you in anticipation of a divorce." The room spun around Sarah. Not only was her husband cheating, but he was actively conspiring to steal from her and their unborn daughter. "What kind of evidence?" Marcus played an audio recording on his phone. David's voice was crystal clear. "Once Sarah has the baby and settles into that domestic routine, she'll be easier to manage. Elena can help me move the remaining assets offshore, and then we can make our move." Elena's voice responded, "Just make sure she doesn't get suspicious before then. Pregnant women can be so emotional and unpredictable." David laughed. "Trust me, Sarah's too busy playing house to notice what's really happening. She gave up her career to support my dreams, and now she's going to pay the price for that naivety." Sarah ran to Marcus's bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. When she returned, Marcus was waiting with a glass of water and a box of tissues. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said gently, "but you needed to know what you're dealing with." Sarah wiped her eyes, thinking of her daughter growing inside her. "What are my options? We document everything, freeze whatever assets we can, and prepare for legal battle. But Sarah, can I call you Sarah? You need to understand that David and Elena have been planning this for months. They're not going to go down without a fight." That evening, Sarah sat in her sister's small apartment, Jennifer's arms wrapped around her as she cried for the death of her marriage and the future she'd imagined for her daughter. "I gave him everything," Sarah sobbed. "My career, my independence, my trust. I made myself completely dependent on him, and now he's going to use that against me." "No, he's not," Jennifer said fiercely. "Because we're going to fight back. You're stronger than you know. Sarah, you just forgot for a while." Sarah placed her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter move restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. "I won't let them destroy us," she whispered. "I won't let our daughter grow up thinking this is what love looks like." For the first time since answering Elena's phone call, Sarah felt something other than despair. She felt anger, and anger, she was beginning to learn, could be a powerful motivator for a woman with nothing left to lose. The war for her future was about to begin. Sarah stared at the ceiling of Jennifer's cramped apartment, listening to her 8-year-old niece Emma getting ready for school in the next room. The sounds of normal family life, cereal bowls clinking, backpack zippers closing, hurried morning conversations, felt foreign after weeks of living in David's marble mausoleum, where every sound echoed with emptiness. "Aunt Sarah, are you feeling better today?" Emma poked her head around the doorway, her gap-toothed smile innocent and concerned. "Much better, sweetheart," Sarah lied, forcing herself to sit up on the pull-out couch that had been her bed for the past week. At 24 weeks pregnant, her body ached from the uncomfortable mattress, but physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional devastation that threatened to swallow her whole. After Jennifer dropped Emma at school, she returned with coffee and grim determination. "Okay, what's on the agenda today?" "More legal meetings." Sarah nodded, pulling Marcus's latest report from her purse. The private investigator had been thorough, documenting not just David's affair, but the systematic financial abuse that had been happening under her nose for months. "The forensic accountant found another offshore account," Sarah said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "David moved $2 million to the Cayman Islands last month, money from our joint savings, our investment portfolio, even the college fund we started for the baby." Jennifer's face flushed with anger. "That bastard! How is this legal?" "It's not, but proving it in court will take time and money we don't have." Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. "My lawyer says David's team is already claiming the money was moved for tax purposes and business investments. Since Elena is listed as a business partner on some of the accounts, they're arguing it's legitimate." "What about the recording, the one where David admits he's planning to leave you with nothing?" "Inadmissible. Marcus recorded it without David's consent, so it can't be used in court." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Isn't it ironic the most damning evidence against my husband can't be used because it violates his privacy rights?" Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her former boss at the marketing agency where she'd worked before marriage. "Sarah, heard about your situation? So sorry, but we can't offer you a position right now. David's connections in the industry make it complicated. Hope you understand." It was the third rejection she'd received this week. David's influence in Seattle's tech community was vast, and word had apparently spread that hiring Sarah Matthews would be problematic. "Blacklisted," Sarah said, showing Jennifer the text. "David's making sure I can't get work anywhere in the city." Jennifer snatched the phone, her fingers flying as she typed a response. "These cowards don't deserve you anyway. We'll figure something else out." But figuring something else out required resources Sarah no longer had. Her credit cards had been canceled. David claimed fraudulent activity and convinced the banks to freeze the accounts pending investigation. Her access to their joint checking account had been revoked. Even her car had been repossessed when she couldn't make the payments David had secretly stopped. The only money Sarah had was the few $1,000s in a personal savings account David didn't know about. Her emergency fund from before their marriage, which would last maybe another month if she was careful. "I need to see Maya today," Sarah said, referring to the therapist Jennifer had helped her find. "I can't afford many more sessions, but I'm falling apart." Maya Chen's office was a haven of calm in Sarah's chaotic world. The therapist's gentle demeanor and non-judgmental approach had been the only thing keeping Sarah from complete despair. "How are you feeling today, Sarah?" Maya asked as Sarah settled into the familiar chair across from her. "Like I'm drowning," Sarah admitted. "Like everything I believed about my life was a lie, and I'm too stupid to have seen it coming." "You're not stupid. You're a woman who loved and trusted her husband. There's nothing wrong with that." "There's everything wrong with that," Sarah's voice cracked. "I gave up my career, my independence, my financial security. For what? For a man who was planning to throw me away like garbage the moment I became inconvenient." Maya leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your life before David." "Who were you then?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember the person she'd been 8 years ago. "I was successful. I had my own apartment, my own money, my own dreams. I was good at my job, really good. I built marketing campaigns that made companies millions. What happened to that woman? She fell in love with a man who convinced her that being a wife and mother was more important than having a career. She believed him when he said he'd take care of everything, that she could trust him with their future." Sarah's voice was bitter. She was naive enough to think love was enough. Love is important, Sarah, but healthy love doesn't require you to diminish yourself. Sarah placed her hands on her growing belly, feeling her daughter's movements. "How do I explain to my child that her father didn't want her, that her very existence was a nightmare he wanted to escape? You explain that her father's limitations have nothing to do with her worth, and you show her, through your actions, what real strength looks like." After therapy, Sarah walked slowly back to Jennifer's apartment, her body heavy with pregnancy and despair. The Seattle spring rain had started again, soaking through her thin jacket and making her shiver. She'd had to sell most of her designer clothes to pay legal fees, keeping only the basics and a few maternity outfits. As she climbed the stairs to Jennifer's second-floor apartment, Sarah felt a sharp pain in her lower back. She paused, gripping the railing, as another pain shot through her abdomen. "Not now," she whispered to her unborn daughter. "Please, not now." But the contractions were coming regularly, and by the time Jennifer returned from work, Sarah was doubled over in pain. "Hospital. Now," Jennifer said, grabbing her keys. The emergency room at Swedish Medical Center was a blur of activity and terror. Sarah was rushed into labor and delivery, monitors attached to her belly as doctors tried to stop what appeared to be premature labor. "Mrs. Matthews, you're 25 weeks pregnant," Dr. Rodriguez explained as nurses busied themselves around Sarah's bed. "We need to do everything we can to stop these contractions. Your baby needs more time to develop." "Is she going to be okay?" Sarah gasped between contractions. "We're doing everything we can, but I need you to stay calm and let the medications work." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the panic and pain. She was alone. David was nowhere to be found, probably with Elena, planning their next move to destroy what was left of Sarah's life. Her phone, sitting on the bedside table, kept buzzing with notifications. Through the chaos, Sarah saw David's name appear on the screen, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. What was the point? He'd made it clear that she and their daughter were nothing more than obstacles to his happiness with Elena. Hours passed before the contractions finally stopped. Dr. Rodriguez's expression was serious as she sat beside Sarah's bed. "The baby is stable for now, but your stress levels are dangerously high. I'm going to be frank with you. Sarah, emotional trauma can trigger premature labor. You need to find ways to manage your anxiety, or you could lose this pregnancy." "I don't know how to manage anxiety when my entire life is falling apart," Sarah whispered. What support system do you have, family, friends? My sister, but I can't keep living on her couch. She has her own child to worry about. Dr. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. There are resources available, support groups for women in crisis, financial assistance programs, shelters specifically for pregnant women facing domestic situations. Shelters. The word hit Sarah like a slap. She'd gone from living in a $3 million mansion to needing shelter assistance in less than 2 months. That night, alone in the hospital room, Sarah finally answered David's calls. "Sarah, thank God. I heard you were in the hospital. How's the baby?" His voice sounded genuinely concerned, and for a moment, Sarah's resolve wavered. This was the man she'd loved for 8 years, the father of her child. "She's okay, for now. I'm coming to see you." "Don't!" Sarah's voice was firmer than she felt. "I know what you're doing, David. I know about the money, the offshore accounts, Elena's history. I know you've been planning this for months." Silence on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I think the stress is making you paranoid again. Why don't we talk about this when you're feeling better? I have bank statements, David, photographs, recordings of you and Elena discussing how to destroy my life." Another pause. When David spoke again, his voice was cold and calculating, a tone Sarah had never heard directed at her before. "If you have recordings of private conversations, you should know that's illegal in Washington state. And if you're planning to make wild accusations in court, you should also know that mental instability is grounds for supervised visitation only." The threat was clear. If Sarah fought back, David would claim she was mentally unfit and try to take their daughter away completely. "You can't do this," Sarah whispered. "I can do whatever's necessary to protect my interests. You gave up your career, Sarah. You made yourself completely dependent on me. That was your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." The line went dead. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, staring at the monitors tracking her daughter's heartbeat, strong and steady. Despite everything, her little girl was a fighter, just like Sarah used to be. On the bedside table, her phone lit up with a notification. Someone had posted photos on social media, images of Elena and David on a romantic beach vacation, both of them tanned and smiling. Elena's hand possessively placed on David's chest. The photos were tagged with David's location and had hundreds of likes and comments. David's business associates and social circle were seeing him publicly with another woman while his pregnant wife was fighting for their child's life in a hospital bed. Sarah screenshotted everything, her hands shaking with rage rather than fear for the first time in weeks. David wanted to play dirty. He wanted to destroy her reputation and steal her future. Two could play that game. She opened her laptop and began typing, creating social media accounts David didn't know about, reaching out to contacts from her old marketing life who might still remember her capabilities. If David thought she was going to quietly disappear, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Sarah Matthews, the successful marketing executive, was waking up, and she was furious. Her daughter kicked strongly against her ribs, as if approving of her mother's newfound determination. Sarah placed her hand on her belly and made a promise. "We're going to fight, baby girl. We're going to show them what happens when they underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose." 3 days after being discharged from the hospital, Sarah sat in Maya's office with a determination that surprised even herself. The emotional breakdown that had triggered her premature labor had somehow cleared her mind, burning away the self-doubt and fear that David had carefully cultivated during their marriage. "You look different today," Maya observed, settling into her chair across from Sarah. "I feel different, angry, but in a good way, like I'm remembering who I used to be." Sarah pulled out a thick folder of documents. "I've been doing research on Elena Torres, or Elena Vasquez, which is apparently her real name." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What did you find a pattern?" "Elena targets successful men going through midlife transitions, but there's more to it than simple gold digging." Sarah spread newspaper clippings across the coffee table. Her first victim was Richard Brennan, a real estate developer in Phoenix. Elena became his assistant, then business partner, then mistress. Within 18 months, Richard's wife had filed for divorce, his business had collapsed, and Elena had disappeared with $3 million. What happened to Richard? Suicide, 6 months after Elena vanished. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. The second victim was Jonathan Park, a tech executive in San Francisco. Same pattern. Elena joined his company as a consultant, began an affair, systematically drained his accounts. Jonathan's wife left him, taking their children. He ended up declaring bankruptcy and moved back in with his parents. Maya frowned. And you think Elena is running the same con on David? I thought so at first, but then I found this. Sarah pulled out a legal document. Elena Vasquez legally changed her name to Elena Torres 2 years ago, right around the time she first made contact with David's company. That suggests premeditation. It gets worse. Sarah's voice hardened. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the money David moved offshore. The accounts aren't just in Elena's name. They're structured in a way that protects David's assets if their scheme falls apart. David isn't Elena's victim. He's her partner. Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. You're saying David knew about Elena's history and willingly participated in defrauding you? I'm saying David orchestrated it. Sarah pulled out printed emails she'd obtained through her lawyer's discovery process. These are communications between David and Elena from 6 months before she officially joined his company. They discuss the mark, that's me, and the best strategies for asset protection during transition. The therapist read through the emails, her expression growing more disturbed with each page. Sarah, this is beyond infidelity. This is criminal conspiracy. And it gets worse. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Remember how I told you David became distant right after I announced my pregnancy? I found out why. According to these emails, my pregnancy was an unexpected complication that required accelerated timeline implementation. Maya set down the emails, her professional composure slipping slightly. He saw your pregnancy as a threat to his plan. He saw our daughter as a liability, more claims on his assets, more legal complications in the divorce. Sarah placed her hand on her growing belly. That's why he started moving money so aggressively. He needed to hide everything before the baby was born, and my legal rights as a mother became more complex. What are you going to do with this information? Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm going to destroy them both, but I need your help. Sarah, I can't, not as my therapist, as my friend. Sarah leaned forward. Elena and David think they're dealing with a broken, dependent housewife. They have no idea that I spent 10 years building marketing campaigns designed to destroy my clients' competitors. I know how to wage psychological warfare. Maya, I just need someone to help me stay focused and not let emotion cloud my judgment. Maya considered this carefully. What exactly are you planning? Elena's pattern depends on staying under the radar until she's ready to disappear. She can't afford public scrutiny or media attention. And David's business reputation is everything to him. His clients, his investors, his social standing. Sarah's eyes glittered with cold satisfaction. I'm going to give them both exactly the kind of attention they can't afford. That afternoon, Sarah met with Marcus Chen at a downtown cafe. The private investigator had more information, and none of it was good news for David and Elena. I've been monitoring Elena's communications, Marcus reported, sliding a tablet across the table. She's planning to disappear within the next month. There are plane tickets to Switzerland under a false name, and she's been liquidating assets systematically. Sarah scrolled through bank transfer records showing Elena moving money to accounts in non-extradition countries. What about David? That's where it gets interesting. David thinks he's using Elena, but Elena's been planning to double-cross him from the beginning. Marcus showed Sarah intercepted text messages between Elena and an unknown contact. She's been feeding information about David's business practices to federal investigators. Sarah looked up from the tablet, confused. Federal investigators? Your husband's tech company has been under investigation for patent theft and corporate espionage for over a year. Elena's been gathering evidence while she drains his accounts. Marcus's expression was grim. She's positioning herself as a whistleblower who cooperated with authorities. When David goes down, she'll disappear with the money and claim she was just another victim. So David's going to lose everything anyway. Everything except what Elena's already stolen. And if the federal charges stick, he could face serious prison time. Sarah felt an unexpected surge of satisfaction. David had thought he was so clever, manipulating both Elena and Sarah, but he'd chosen the wrong partner for his schemes. "What's my best move here?" Sarah asked. Marcus pulled out another folder. Elena made one mistake. She got greedy. Some of the money she's stolen came from David's business accounts, but some came from federal contracts. That makes it government money, which brings this under federal jurisdiction. Meaning if you cooperate with the FBI investigation, you might be able to recover not just your marital assets, but claim whistleblower protection and potentially collect a percentage of any recovered federal funds. Sarah stared at Marcus, her mind racing through the possibilities. "Are you suggesting I contact the FBI? I'm suggesting you might have more leverage than you realize. Elena and David think you're powerless, but you have something they don't: clean hands and detailed financial records of everything they've stolen." That evening, Sarah sat in Jennifer's living room, surrounded by documents and laptop computers like a war room. Emma was at a friend's house, giving the sisters privacy to plan Sarah's counterattack. "This is insane," Jennifer said, reading through the FBI contact information Marcus had provided. "You're talking about taking on a federal investigation. I'm talking about fighting back instead of lying down and letting them destroy me." Sarah's voice was stronger than it had been in months. "David thinks I'm helpless because I gave up my career. But I didn't give up my brain or my skills. I just forgot how to use them." Jennifer looked at her sister with growing admiration. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me document everything. We're going to build an airtight case that shows exactly how David and Elena conspired to defraud me, their business partners, and the federal government." Sarah opened her laptop. "And then we're going to make sure the whole world knows what kind of people they really are." As if summoned by her determination, Sarah's phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," Jennifer urged. "But record everything." Sarah activated the recording app and picked up the call. "Hello, David. Sarah, we need to talk. In person. There are things I need to explain about our situation." "Our situation?" Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "You mean your affair and embezzlement of our marital assets?" A pause. "Sarah, you're being unreasonable. I've made some mistakes. Yes, but I'm trying to do what's best for our family. If you'll work with me, we can resolve this amicably." "What exactly are you proposing?" "Come home. We'll work out a fair settlement. You can keep the house, a reasonable monthly allowance for you and the baby. All you have to do is sign an agreement that this was a mutual separation with no fault on either side." Sarah looked at Jennifer, who was frantically shaking her head. "And in exchange, you agree not to make any more wild accusations about Elena or my business practices. No more private investigators. No more threatening to involve lawyers or authorities?" David's voice hardened slightly. "I'm trying to be generous here. Sarah, don't force me to play hardball. What happens if I refuse? Then I'll have to protect myself and my business interests. I have documented evidence of your mental instability, the paranoid accusations, the emergency room visits, the erratic behavior. A judge might decide that you're not fit for primary custody of our daughter." The threat was clear, but Sarah no longer felt the terror it would have inspired a week ago. Instead, she felt cold, calculating anger. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Don't think too long. This offer expires tomorrow night." After David hung up, Sarah turned to Jennifer with a smile that was all teeth. "He just made a critical mistake. Anyhow, he threatened to take our daughter away. That's documented now, and it shows consciousness of guilt. Sarah was already typing notes on her laptop. More importantly, he's given us a timeline. Tomorrow night. That means whatever Elaine is planning, it's happening soon. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency meeting. Elena's moving the money tonight. If we're going to stop her, we need to act now. Sarah stood up, her hand on her belly as her daughter kicked strongly against her ribs. Baby girl, your mama's about to go to war. And this time, we're going to win. Jennifer grabbed her car keys. Where are we going? To the FBI field office. It's time to remind David and Elena that the quiet little housewife they've been manipulating used to eat people like them for breakfast. As they drove through the Seattle night toward downtown, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the thrill of the hunt. She'd been David's victim for too long. Now it was time to become Elena's worst nightmare. The FBI field office in downtown Seattle was buzzing with late-night activity when Sarah and Jennifer arrived. Agent Catherine Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, met them in a sterile conference room lined with whiteboards covered in financial charts and surveillance photos. Mrs. Matthews, thank you for coming in, Agent Morrison said, gesturing for Sarah to sit. Your private investigator contacted us with some interesting information about Elena Torres and your husband's business practices. Sarah placed her thick folder of documents on the table. I have evidence that my husband and Elena have been systematically stealing from me, their business partners, and potentially federal contractors. Agent Morrison opened Sarah's folder, scanning the bank statements and email printouts. We've been investigating David's company for patent theft and corporate espionage. Ms. Torres contacted us 6 months ago claiming to be a whistleblower with information about illegal activities. She's not a whistleblower, Sarah said firmly. She's a con artist who's been planning to steal everything and disappear. I can prove it. For the next 3 hours, Sarah walked Agent Morrison through Elena's pattern of targeting wealthy men, the fraudulent financial transfers, and the communications proving that David was a willing participant rather than a victim. This changes our entire perspective on the case, Agent Morrison admitted. If Elena Torres has been working a long-term con while simultaneously gathering evidence for us, we need to reassess everything. When is she planning to disappear? Jennifer asked. Our surveillance suggests within the next 48 hours. She's liquidated most of her accessible assets and has transportation arranged. Agent Morrison looked at Sarah seriously. If you're willing to cooperate as a witness, we might be able to stop her before she leaves the country. But it would require you to maintain contact with both Elena and your husband while we gather final evidence. Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly. At 26 weeks pregnant, stress was a dangerous risk, but the thought of Elena and David getting away with their crimes was worse than any physical threat. What do you need me to do? The plan was simple but dangerous. Sarah would return home, pretending to accept David's offer of reconciliation while wearing a wire to record their conversations. Meanwhile, the FBI would monitor Elena's movements and freeze any assets they could identify. The key is to get David to admit his role in the conspiracy on tape, Agent Morrison explained. We need proof that he knew about Elena's criminal history and willingly participated in defrauding both you and his business partners. 2 days later, Sarah stood in front of the house she'd once considered her dream home. The modern mansion looked cold and imposing in the gray Seattle morning, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting her own anxious face back at her. David opened the door before she could knock, his expression carefully composed. Sarah, I'm glad you decided to be reasonable. I want what's best for our daughter, Sarah replied, the microphone hidden in her maternity top, picking up every word. David led her to the living room where Elena was waiting, lounging on the white leather sofa as if she owned the place. She was dressed in one of Sarah's designer dresses, altered to fit her smaller frame. Hola, Sarah, Elena purred. David thought it would be good for us all to talk together, to clear the air. Sarah forced herself to sit calmly despite the rage building in her chest. I appreciate you both wanting to resolve this peacefully. We're prepared to be very generous, David said, sliding a legal document across the coffee table. The house, monthly support, a college fund for the baby, All you have to do is sign this agreement, acknowledging that our separation was mutual and amicable. Sarah pretended to read the document while Elena watched her with predatory satisfaction. This seems fair, Sarah said carefully. But I'm curious about one thing. How did you two decide to work together on this? I mean, Elena, you've only been with the company for 2 years. Elena's eyes sharpened, but David jumped in smoothly. Elena's brilliant with financial strategies. She helped me understand how to protect our assets during uncertain times. Protect them from what? Sarah asked innocently. David and Elena exchanged a quick glance. From market volatility, lawsuits, the usual business risks, David said. But some of these accounts were opened months before you filed for separation? Sarah pressed. It's almost like you were planning this before I even knew there were problems in our marriage. Sarah, you're overthinking this, Elena interjected. David just wanted to make sure you and the baby would be taken care of, even if something happened to the business. That's so thoughtful. Elena, you must have experience with this kind of financial planning. Have you helped other men protect their assets during divorces? Elena's smile became forced. I have a background in financial consulting. In Phoenix, San Francisco, Sarah watched Elena's face pale. I'm just curious about your experience with men like Richard Brennan and Jonathan Park. The silence in the room was deafening. David's confident demeanor cracked slightly, while Elena looked like a cornered animal. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena said carefully. Of course you do. Richard Brennan, the real estate developer who killed himself after you disappeared with $3 million? Jonathan Park, the tech executive who ended up bankrupt and homeless? Should I be worried that David might suffer the same fate? David stood abruptly. Sarah, you're clearly having another paranoid episode. Elena, maybe you should go. No, Elena should stay, Sarah said, rising to face them both. After all, you two are partners in this. You have been from the beginning, haven't you? David, you knew exactly who Elena was when you hired her. You knew about her history with wealthy married men. You're delusional, David snapped, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Am I because I have the emails between you two from before Elena officially joined your company? The ones where you discuss the mark and asset protection strategies. The ones where you call my pregnancy an unexpected complication? Elena shot to her feet, her calm facade finally cracking. You little bitch. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Sarah replied calmly. 2 sociopaths who thought they could destroy my life and steal my daughter's future. But you made one critical mistake. What's that? David asked, his voice dangerous. You underestimated me. Sarah smiled, her hand moving to her belly where her daughter was kicking strongly. You forgot that I used to be very good at destroying people who threatened my clients. The difference is, this time, it's personal. Elena pulled out her phone, frantically typing. We need to move up the timeline, she said to David. She knows too much. Move up what timeline? Sarah asked. David's mask finally fell away completely. The timeline for you to have an accident? Sarah, something stress-related. Tragic, but believable for a woman with your history of mental instability. You're threatening to kill me. I'm protecting my investments, David said coldly. You should have taken the generous offer and disappeared quietly. Now you're forcing me to take more permanent measures. Elena was already moving toward the door. I'll handle the offshore transfers. You take care of her. But as Elena reached for the door handle, it opened from the outside. Agent Morrison and 3 other FBI agents entered, weapons drawn. Elena Torres, David Matthews, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The next few minutes were a blur of handcuffs, Miranda rights, and Elena's furious Spanish curses. David went silent, his face gray with shock as he realized his perfect plan had collapsed. As the agents led David and Elena away, Sarah sank onto the sofa, her entire body shaking with relief and adrenaline. Agent Morrison sat beside her, removing the wire from Sarah's clothing. You did perfectly, the agent said. Those recordings will put them away for a long time. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the nursery of her new apartment, hanging tiny pink dresses in the closet. The space was modest compared to the mansion she'd shared with David, but it was hers, paid for with recovered assets and a substantial reward from the federal government for her cooperation in the investigation. Elena had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. David received 12 years for his role in the scheme. His tech empire dissolved and its assets distributed among his victims. Sarah's phone rang as she folded baby blankets. Maya's name appeared on the screen. "How are you feeling?" the therapist asked. "Strong," Sarah replied, and meant it. "Tired, scared about being a single mother, but strong. You've accomplished something remarkable. Sarah, you took control of your life when everything seemed hopeless." Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. In the distance, she could see the building where David's company used to be housed. Soon, her daughter would be born into a world where her mother was known for her courage rather than her victimhood. "I start my new job next week," Sarah told Maya. "Running marketing for a nonprofit that helps women escape financial abuse. It's like everything I went through was preparation for helping other women in similar situations." "And the book deal?" Sarah smiled. "The publisher wants to call it Betrayed: How I Exposed My Millionaire Husband's Criminal Empire. A bit dramatic, but it should help a lot of women recognize the warning signs." That evening, Sarah's sister Jennifer came over with takeout and baby gifts. Emma, now 9, was excited about her new cousin and had insisted on picking out pink pajamas covered in unicorns. "Any word from David's family?" Jennifer asked as they ate Chinese food on Sarah's new furniture. "His parents want visitation rights after he gets out of prison. My lawyer says I can fight it, given his threats against me and the baby." Sarah rubbed her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks. But that's a decision for future Sarah to make. Present Sarah just wants to focus on staying healthy and building our new life. "Speaking of new life," Jennifer said with a mischievous smile, "Marcus Chen called me today." Sarah raised an eyebrow. The private investigator had been nothing but professional during their work together, but she'd noticed the way he looked at her, with respect and admiration rather than pity. "He wanted to know if you'd be interested in dinner sometime. After the baby comes, of course." Sarah considered this. Marcus was kind, honest, and had seen her at her absolute worst while still treating her with dignity. The idea of eventually opening her heart to someone new was terrifying, but not impossible. "Maybe," she said. "But first, I need to meet my daughter and figure out who I am as a mother." 2 weeks later, Sarah woke to strong contractions in the early morning hours. Jennifer drove her to the hospital through empty Seattle streets, holding her hand as they rushed through the emergency entrance. Labor was long and difficult, but when Dr. Rodriguez finally placed Sarah's daughter in her arms, everything else faded away. The baby was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and David's dark hair, but Sarah's determined chin. "Hello, beautiful," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama, and I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing exactly how loved and wanted you are." She'd chosen the name months ago Victoria, meaning victory, because her daughter represented triumph over every attempt to break Sarah's spirit. As Victoria slept peacefully in her arms, Sarah made silent promises. Her daughter would never see her mother accept less than she deserved. She would grow up knowing that women were capable of rebuilding their lives from ashes. Most importantly, she would understand that sometimes the greatest victory was simply refusing to give up. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibilities. Sarah had lost a marriage and a fortune, but she'd gained something infinitely more valuable: herself. And for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. 6 months after Victoria's birth, Sarah sat in her home office reviewing client files for the nonprofit organization where she now served as marketing director. The work was meaningful, helping women escape financial abuse and rebuild their lives. But it also served as a constant reminder of how far she'd come from the broken woman who'd once lived in fear of her husband's manipulations. Victoria babbled happily in her bouncer, reaching for colorful toys while Sarah worked. The baby had inherited David's intelligence but seemed to have Sarah's stubborn determination, crying when she wanted something and refusing to be placated with distractions. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. David's parole hearing moved up. Thought you should know. Sarah's blood ran cold. David had been sentenced to 12 years, but with good behavior and overcrowding in federal prisons, he could be released in as little as 8. The hearing was supposed to be next year. Not now. She called Marcus immediately. His lawyers are claiming health issues require early release. Marcus explained. Apparently, David's developed anxiety and depression in prison. The irony isn't lost on me. What are my options? You can submit a victim impact statement opposing parole. But Sarah, there's something else. Elena escaped federal custody 2 days ago. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. Escaped how? Transport vehicle accident during a medical appointment? 2 guards injured. Elena vanished. The FBI thinks she had help from outside contacts. Sarah looked at Victoria, peacefully playing with her toys, oblivious to the danger that might be circling them. Do you think she'll come after me? Elena's smart. She knows you're the reason she lost everything. But she's also pragmatic. Revenge is a luxury when you're a fugitive. Marcus paused. Still, I'd recommend increased security measures, just in case. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her lawyer's office, drafting her statement opposing David's parole. Rachel Kim had become more than Sarah's attorney over the past year. She was a friend and advocate who'd helped Sarah navigate the complex legal aftermath of David and Elena's arrests. The parole board needs to understand that David represents an ongoing threat, Rachel explained as they reviewed the statement. His threats against you and Victoria were recorded. He conspired to have you killed to protect his assets. But he was following Elena's lead. Wasn't he? His lawyers will argue he was manipulated. That's exactly what they'll argue. David's playing the victim now, claiming Elena seduced and controlled him. Rachel's expression was skeptical. It's a common defense strategy for men caught in financial crimes with female accomplices. Sarah thought about this, remembering the cold calculation in David's voice when he threatened her. He wasn't Elena's victim. He was her partner. The recordings prove that. The recordings prove conspiracy, but they also show Elena taking the lead in many conversations. A skilled defense attorney could spin that as evidence of David's diminished culpability. That evening, Sarah attended a support group meeting for women who'd experienced financial abuse. She'd been invited to speak about her experience, both as therapy for herself and as inspiration for others still trapped in similar situations. The community center was small and dimly lit, but the 15 women who gathered in the circle of folding chairs represented millions of dollars in stolen assets and decades of manipulation by supposedly loving partners. My name is Sarah, and 2 years ago, I discovered that my millionaire husband was planning to steal everything and disappear with his mistress, she began, her voice steady despite the familiar pain of remembering. She told them about the gradual isolation, the way David had encouraged her to give up her career, the slow erosion of her financial independence. The women nodded with recognition. They'd all experienced variations of the same systematic abuse. The hardest part wasn't discovering the affair, Sarah continued. It was realizing that I'd been complicit in my own victimization. I'd given up my power willingly because I believed that love meant sacrifice. How did you find the strength to fight back? Asked Marie, a woman in her 50s whose husband had emptied their retirement accounts to fund his gambling addiction. I got angry. Really, truly angry. Not just hurt or disappointed, but furious that someone would try to steal my daughter's future. Sarah smiled at the memory. Anger can be incredibly motivating when you channel it properly. After the meeting, Sarah was approached by a young woman who'd been sitting quietly in the back. She looked to be in her early 20s, with dark hair and nervous energy. Ms. Matthews, I'm Jessica Park. Jonathan Park was my father. Sarah's breath caught. Jonathan Park, one of Elena's previous victims, the tech executive who'd lost everything and moved back in with his parents. Jessica, I'm so sorry about what happened to your father. He never recovered from what that woman did to him. The shame, the financial ruin, the way everyone blamed him for being stupid enough to fall for her tricks. Jessica's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack brought on by stress and depression. Sarah felt the weight of Elena's destruction in a new way. It wasn't just money the woman stole. It was lives, futures, entire families torn apart by her calculated cruelty. I want to help you, Jessica continued. I know Elena escaped, and I know she blames you for destroying her operation. My father kept detailed records of everything Elena did to him. If she comes after you, I want to make sure she pays for all of it. Sarah exchanged contact information with Jessica, adding another ally to her growing network of Elena's survivors. The women had been forming connections across the country, sharing information and supporting each other through the legal aftermath of Elena's crimes. 2 weeks later, Sarah's carefully rebuilt world was shattered again. She came home from work to find her apartment door slightly ajar, the security alarm disabled. Victoria was at Jennifer's house for the afternoon, thankfully. But someone had been inside Sarah's home. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but Sarah could sense the violation immediately. Drawers had been searched and carefully rearranged. Her computer had been moved slightly. Someone had gone through her personal belongings with professional precision. Agent Morrison arrived within an hour, along with a forensics team that dusted for fingerprints and checked for electronic surveillance devices. Elena's signature, the agent confirmed after examining the scene. Thorough search, but careful not to leave obvious evidence of intrusion. She was looking for something specific. What could she want? All the evidence is already with the FBI. Information about your current life, security codes, schedules, relationships. Elena's planning something, and she needs to know your vulnerabilities. Sarah spent that night at Jennifer's house, holding Victoria close while her sister paced angrily around the living room. This is insane, Jennifer fumed. That psychopath breaks out of prison and immediately targets you. What did she think? That you'd just sit quietly while she destroyed your life again? She's not planning to destroy my life this time, Sarah said quietly, watching Victoria sleep peacefully in her arms. She's planning to end it. The realization came with startling clarity. Elena had lost everything because of Sarah's testimony. Her freedom, her stolen millions, her entire carefully constructed identity. For someone like Elena, who'd built her life on control and manipulation, Sarah represented the ultimate humiliation. I need to call Marcus, Sarah said, reaching for her phone. Marcus arrived within the hour, his expression grim as Agent Morrison briefed him on the break-in. Sarah noticed how naturally he fit into their crisis management team, how his presence made her feel safer without making her feel helpless. Elena's pattern with previous victims was financial destruction, Marcus said, reviewing files on his laptop. But this is different. She can't run her usual long-term con because she's a fugitive. This feels more like revenge. The question is whether she'll try to hurt Sarah directly or target people Sarah cares about, Agent Morrison added. Elena's smart enough to know that going after Sarah personally brings more heat from law enforcement. Sarah looked around Jennifer's living room, her sister loading the dishwasher, Emma doing homework at the kitchen table, Victoria sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Elena could hurt any of them to get to Sarah. I won't put my family at risk, Sarah said firmly. What are my options? We can offer witness protection, Agent Morrison said. New identities, relocation, federal marshals for security. Or, Marcus interjected, we can set a trap. Sarah looked at him sharply. What kind of trap? Elena wants revenge, but she also wants money. She lost millions when her operation collapsed, and running from the law is expensive. Marcus pulled up financial records on his laptop. There are still some assets that were frozen during the investigation, but never officially forfeited. If Elena thinks she can access them, she might take the risk. You want to use me as bait? I want to give Elena an irresistible target while controlling every variable of the encounter. Marcus looked at Agent Morrison for confirmation. If we do this right, we can end Elena's threat permanently while keeping Sarah and her family completely safe. Sarah considered the proposal while Victoria stirred in her sleep. The alternative was years of looking over her shoulder, wondering when Elena might strike, living in fear that her daughter would become collateral damage in someone else's war for revenge. What would the plan involve? Agent Morrison and Marcus exchanged glances. We'd need you to appear vulnerable. Make Elena think you're isolated and unprotected. Then, when she makes her move, we'd be ready. It's dangerous, Agent Morrison added. Even with full surveillance and backup, there are risks we can't eliminate entirely. Sarah thought about the support group meeting, about Jessica Park and all the other women whose lives had been destroyed by Elena's greed. She thought about Victoria, who deserved to grow up free from the shadows of her parents' past mistakes. I'll do it, Sarah said, but I have conditions. My family stays protected no matter what happens to me, and when this is over, Elena goes away for life. No plea deals, no reduced sentences. Done, Agent Morrison agreed. As they began planning the operation that would either end Elena's threat forever or cost Sarah everything, Victoria woke up and looked directly at her mother with David's intelligent dark eyes. But where David's gaze had eventually turned cold and calculating, Victoria's was full of trust and love. Sarah made a silent promise to her daughter whatever happened next. Victoria would grow up knowing that her mother had faced every monster and won. The hunt was about to begin, and this time, Sarah would be the predator instead of the prey. The plan to trap Elena required Sarah to appear isolated and vulnerable, which meant temporarily severing contact with her support network. For a woman who'd rebuilt her life on connections and community, the manufactured loneliness felt like psychological torture. Sarah sat in her apartment, which had been transformed into a high-tech surveillance center by the FBI. Hidden cameras covered every angle, audio equipment recorded every sound, and federal agents monitored from a van parked 3 blocks away. Despite all the protection, she felt utterly alone. Victoria was staying with Jennifer for the duration of the operation, supposedly because Sarah was having another mental health crisis. The cover story made Sarah's skin crawl, but it was necessary to draw Elena out of hiding. She's been monitoring your social media and electronic communications, Agent Morrison explained during one of their briefings. Elena needs to believe you're vulnerable before she'll make contact. Sarah had been posting carefully crafted messages on Facebook and Instagram, subtle hints about financial troubles, professional setbacks, and personal isolation. To the outside world, it looked like Sarah was spiraling into depression. To Elena, it would look like an opportunity. The bait was a rumor that Sarah had discovered additional hidden assets from David's criminal enterprise, money that could be accessed with the right passwords and authorization codes. Marcus had planted the information through channels Elena was known to monitor, making it seem like Sarah was sitting on millions of dollars but was too emotionally unstable to protect herself. 3 days into the operation, Sarah received a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Pike Place Market, main entrance, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Come alone or the offer expires. Sarah's heart raced as she forwarded the message to Agent Morrison. After 6 months of looking over her shoulder, Elena was finally making her move. Pike Place Market was crowded with tourists and locals, providing both cover for Elena and multiple exit routes if she sensed a trap. Sarah wore a wire and carried a tracking device, but she knew Elena was smart enough to scan for surveillance equipment. Sarah spotted Elena immediately. Even with dyed blonde hair and different clothes, her predatory grace was unmistakable. She sat at a corner table in the market's coffee shop, positioned to watch all entrances while keeping her back to a wall. Hello, Elena, Sarah said as she approached the table. Hola, querida. You look terrible. Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. Prison has been much better for my complexion than freedom has been for yours. Sarah sat down carefully, hyper-aware of the FBI agents positioned throughout the market. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Money, freedom, and maybe a little payback for the woman who cost me both. Elena leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But business first. I hear you found some of David's hidden assets. Maybe. What's it worth to you? 50-50 split, 2 million each. Clean money that can't be traced by your FBI friends. Elena's eyes glittered with avarice. All I need are the account numbers and access codes. Sarah pretended to consider this. How do I know you won't just take the money and disappear? Because, mi amor, I want something more valuable than money from you. Elena's smile turned genuinely vicious. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. I already lost everything. My marriage, my home, my financial security. No, you didn't lose everything. You still have your precious daughter, your supportive sister, your new career helping other women. Elena's voice dripped with contempt. You still have hope for the future. I want to take that away from you the same way you took my future away from me. Sarah felt ice form in her veins. What are you talking about? Did you really think I'd just take the money and run after everything you cost me? Elena laughed softly. No, Carita. We're going to empty those accounts together, and then you're going to have a tragic accident. Single mother, overwhelmed by stress, takes too many sleeping pills while her baby stays safely at her sister's house. Very sad, but believable. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice. You destroyed my life. Sarah, now I'm going to end yours. Elena stood up, her movement casual and unhurried. The accounts, tonight, or I start with people you care about instead of you. After Elena left, Sarah sat in the coffee shop for another 20 minutes, following the protocol to avoid appearing connected to law enforcement. Her hands shook as she drank coffee she couldn't taste, replaying Elena's threats in her mind. That evening, Agent Morrison and Marcus debriefed Sarah in her surveilled apartment. The conversation had been recorded perfectly, giving them clear evidence of Elena's intentions. She's escalated from financial crime to conspiracy to commit murder, Agent Morrison noted. That's life without parole if we can prove intent. She already proved intent, Sarah said. She told me exactly what she's planning to do. We need more. Elena's smart enough to claim she was just trying to scare you into cooperating. We need her to take concrete steps toward carrying out the threat. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Sarah's already done enough. We have sufficient evidence to arrest Elena for extortion and terroristic threats, but not enough to guarantee a life sentence, Agent Morrison replied. Elena's already escaped federal custody once. If we don't put her away permanently, she'll just try again in a few years. Sarah thought about Victoria, about the life she wanted to build for her daughter. Elena's threat wasn't just about murder. It was about destroying every good thing Sarah had created from the ashes of her marriage. What do you need me to do? Agent Morrison pulled out a tablet showing financial records. These accounts actually exist. They're part of David's restitution payments to his victims. If Elena tries to access them illegally, that's federal wire fraud and money laundering in addition to the murder conspiracy. So we give her real account numbers. We give her accounts that look real but are actually controlled by the FBI. When she tries to transfer the money, we'll have her on multiple federal charges. Marcus shook his head. This is getting too complicated. Too many variables. Too many ways for Elena to slip through the cracks. Elena won't slip away, Sarah said firmly. She's too angry, too focused on revenge. Her emotions are making her sloppy. Emotions make everyone sloppy, Marcus warned, including you. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about all the women Elena had destroyed. Richard Brennan's widow, living alone after her husband's suicide. Jonathan Park's daughter Jessica, still dealing with the trauma of her father's financial ruin and death. The other victims, whose stories hadn't made the news but whose lives had been shattered just as completely. Elena had to be stopped permanently. Not just arrested, not just imprisoned, but removed from society in a way that ensured she could never hurt another family. The next morning, Sarah received another text. Beacon Hill Park, South Entrance, 8 p.m. Bring the account information, Come alone. This time, the meeting location was more isolated. Fewer witnesses, more opportunities for Elena to carry out her threats. Agent Morrison wanted to abort the operation, but Sarah insisted on seeing it through. She's getting desperate, Sarah argued. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people also do desperate things, Marcus countered. Sarah, if something goes wrong tonight, Victoria loses her mother. Is that really worth the risk? Sarah thought about this question seriously. Was justice for Elena's victims worth orphaning her own daughter? Was her need for closure worth the possibility of never seeing Victoria take her first steps or speak her first words? But then she remembered Elena's words. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Elena wasn't just threatening Sarah. She was threatening everyone Sarah loved. The only way to protect Victoria was to ensure Elena never got another chance to hurt their family. I'm doing this for Victoria, Sarah said finally. I want her to grow up in a world where women like Elena don't get to destroy families and walk away. That evening, as Sarah prepared for what could be her final confrontation with Elena, she video called Victoria at Jennifer's house. The baby was babbling happily, reaching for the phone screen with chubby fingers. Mama loves you so much, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. No matter what happens, remember that you were wanted and loved and fought for. Jennifer took the phone, her expression serious. Sarah, if you're having second thoughts, I'm not, but if something goes wrong tonight, I need you to know that being Victoria's mother has been the greatest privilege of my life. Everything I'm doing is to protect her future. Nothing's going to go wrong, Jennifer said firmly. You're going to trap that psychopath, watch her get arrested, and then come home to your daughter. Sarah smiled through her tears. I love you, Jen. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. As Sarah prepared to leave for Beacon Hill Park, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years ago, she'd been a broken woman living in fear of her husband's manipulations. Tonight, she was walking into danger by choice, fighting not just for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been victimized by someone they trusted. Elena had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the power of women supporting women. Sarah wasn't facing this threat alone. She had Agent Morrison's expertise, Marcus's protection, Jennifer's love, and the collective strength of every survivor who'd found the courage to fight back. The Sisterhood of Survivors was about to show Elena Torres exactly what happened when predators tried to hunt in their territory. As Sarah walked into the darkness of Beacon Hill Park, she carried with her the hopes and prayers of every woman who'd ever been told she was too weak to fight back. Tonight, they would all be proven wrong. Beacon Hill Park was eerily quiet at 8 p.m., the usual evening joggers and dog walkers having retreated indoors as Seattle's autumn rain began to fall. Sarah walked slowly along the main path, her footsteps echoing off wet pavement, while FBI agents took positions in the surrounding trees and buildings. She carried a briefcase containing fake financial documents that looked authentic enough to fool Elena temporarily. The real trap wasn't the money, it was Elena's own arrogance and desperate need for revenge. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. Playground, northwest corner, you have 5 minutes. The children's playground sat in a depression surrounded by tall trees, creating a natural amphitheater that would muffle sounds and hide activities from casual observers. It was exactly the kind of location Elena would choose, isolated but familiar, with multiple escape routes through the surrounding residential neighborhood. Elena emerged from behind the jungle gym like a specter, her blonde hair dark with rain and her designer clothes replaced with all-black tactical gear. She looked lean and dangerous, like a predator finally dropping all pretense of civility. You came alone. Good. Elena's voice carried easily across the empty playground. Walk toward me slowly. Keep your hands visible. Sarah obeyed, clutching the briefcase while rain soaked through her jacket. She could feel the weight of the recording equipment hidden in her clothes, documenting Elena's every word for the federal prosecutors who would eventually put her away forever. You brought the account information, Elena asked when Sarah was close enough to touch. Everything you asked for. Account numbers, passwords, Routing information. Sarah held up the briefcase. $2 million in clean money that the FBI doesn't know about. Elena's eyes glittered with satisfaction. David was always terrible at hiding assets, too confident in his own cleverness to consider that someone might be watching. Speaking of David, his parole hearing was approved. He'll be out in 6 months. David's no longer my concern. Elena's smile was cold as winter rain. He served his purpose, just like all the others. Weak men who think with their dicks instead of their brains. Sarah set the briefcase on a wet picnic table between them. The account information is inside. But first, I want to know why. Why destroy so many lives for money you can't even spend safely? You wouldn't understand, Corita. You've never had to fight for everything you have. Elena circled the table like a shark, never taking her eyes off Sarah. I grew up in poverty in Colombia, watching my mother work 3 jobs to pay for my father's drinking. I learned early that men will promise you everything and give you nothing unless you take it from them. So you decided to steal from innocent families. Innocent? Elena laughed harshly. Richard Brennan built his fortune exploiting immigrant workers. Jonathan Park made millions selling software that spied on employees. David's entire business was built on stolen technology. None of them were innocent. What about their wives, their children? What did they do to deserve having their lives destroyed? Elena's expression hardened. They married men who valued money more than family. They chose comfort over independence. They got exactly what they deserved. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Elena truly believed she was delivering justice rather than committing crimes. In her mind, she was punishing weak men and the women who enabled them. And now you're going to punish me? You're different from the others, Elena admitted. You actually fought back. You cost me everything I'd worked for, destroyed my entire operation. For that, you deserve something special. Elena pulled a small pistol from her jacket, keeping it low and pointed at Sarah's chest. Open the briefcase. Slowly. Sarah's hands trembled as she unlocked the case, revealing financial documents that looked authentic enough to pass casual inspection. Elena's greed overrode her caution as she leaned forward to examine the papers. Account numbers, passwords, everything I need. Elena's smile was triumphant. You know, Sarah, in another life, we might have been friends. We're both strong women who refuse to be victims. We're nothing alike, Sarah said firmly. I help women escape abuse. You profit from it. Tomato. Elena pulled out her phone and began photographing the financial documents. Once I transfer this money, I'll disappear to a country without extradition treaties. New identity, new life, new hunting grounds. What about me? Elena looked up from her phone, rain dripping from her hair. What about you? You said you wanted me to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Taking the money isn't enough. Is it? Very perceptive. Elena pocketed her phone and raised the pistol slightly. No, the money isn't enough. I want you to know that your daughter will grow up without a mother because of choices you made. I want your sister to blame herself for not protecting you. I want everyone who ever believed in your strength to question whether fighting back was worth the price. Sarah felt ice form in her veins, but her voice remained steady. You're going to kill me. I'm going to execute you. There's a difference. Elena's eyes were completely cold now, empty of anything resembling human emotion. Your death will send a message to other women who think they can destroy people like me. Some fights aren't worth winning. And if I had just accepted David's abuse, let him steal everything and disappear with you, then you'd still be alive to watch your daughter grow up in poverty. You chose pride over survival. Sarah, now you get to live with the consequences. Or rather, die with them. Elena raised the pistol toward Sarah's head, her finger moving to the trigger. Around them, the rain intensified, muffling sounds and reducing visibility. It was the perfect moment for murder. But Elena had made one critical mistake. She'd been so focused on Sarah that she hadn't noticed Marcus Chen emerging from the trees behind her. Federal agents, drop your weapon. The command came from multiple directions simultaneously as FBI agents materialized from concealment positions around the playground. Elena spun toward the nearest voice, her pistol tracking automatically. Marcus tackled Elena from behind, sending them both crashing into the wet playground equipment. The gun discharged once, the bullet embedding harmlessly in a tree trunk as Marcus fought to pin Elena's arms. "Sarah, run!" Marcus shouted as Elena twisted like a snake in his grip, trying to bring the weapon around toward his head. But Sarah didn't run. Instead, she grabbed the briefcase and swung it hard at Elena's gun hand, connecting with a satisfying crack that sent the pistol spinning across wet concrete. Elena snarled curses in Spanish as Agent Morrison and two other agents reached them, professional zip-tie restraints appearing with practiced efficiency. Within 30 seconds, Elena Torres was face down on wet playground equipment, thoroughly defeated and completely furious. "Elena Torres, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, extortion, and federal wire fraud," Agent Morrison announced as she read Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent, which I strongly recommend you exercise." Elena lifted her head from the concrete, her eyes locked on Sarah with pure hatred. "This isn't over, puta. I have friends, connections. You'll never be safe." "Actually, it is over," Sarah replied calmly. "Your friends were federal informants, and your connections are either dead or in prison. You're alone, Elena, just like you left all your victims." As the agents led Elena away, Marcus approached Sarah with concern written across his face. "Are you hurt when I heard that gunshot?" "I'm fine, better than fine, actually." Sarah looked around the playground where she'd nearly died, feeling strangely peaceful. "It's really over, isn't it?" "It's over," Marcus confirmed. "Elena's going away forever this time. Multiple federal charges, attempted murder of a federal witness, weapons violations. She'll die in prison." Sarah thought about Victoria, safely sleeping at Jennifer's house, unaware that her mother had just eliminated the last threat to their peaceful future. Tomorrow, Sarah could wake up without looking over her shoulder, without jumping at unexpected sounds, without wondering if Elena was planning another attack. "I need to call Jennifer," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. "I need to tell her to bring Victoria home." As Sarah dialed her sister's number, she realized that for the first time in 2 years, she was truly free. Free from David's manipulation, Elena's threats, and the constant fear that had shadowed every moment since discovering her husband's betrayal. The rain was stopping, and through the clouds, Sarah could see the first stars beginning to appear over Seattle's skyline. Victoria would grow up under those stars, safe and loved and completely unaware of the monsters her mother had defeated to protect their future. It was the best victory Sarah could imagine. 1 year later, Sarah stood behind a podium at the Washington State Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 500 women who had come to hear her speak about surviving financial abuse. The book, Betrayed: My Battle Against a Millionaire's Criminal Empire, had become a bestseller, with Sarah donating all proceeds to organizations that helped women escape abusive relationships. 2 years ago, I was a broken woman living on my sister's couch, selling jewelry to pay legal fees while my pregnant body struggled to carry a daughter whose father didn't want her. Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "Today, I stand before you as the CEO of Phoenix Rising, a nonprofit that has helped over 3,000 women reclaim their financial independence." The audience applauded, but Sarah raised her hand for quiet. "I'm not here to celebrate my success. I'm here to tell you that if someone like me, a woman who gave up everything for a man who saw her as disposable, can rebuild her life, then so can you." In the front row, Victoria sat in Marcus's lap, clapping her chubby hands together even though she couldn't understand the words. At 18 months old, she was a happy, confident toddler who charmed everyone she met. Her dark hair had grown into soft curls and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and mischief. Marcus had become a constant presence in their lives over the past year, his patient courtship winning over both Sarah and Victoria. He'd never pushed for more than Sarah was ready to give, understanding that trust was something she needed to rebuild slowly and carefully. The question I'm asked most often is whether I forgive my ex-husband, Sarah continued, her gaze finding Marcus's supportive smile in the audience. The answer is complicated. I forgive David for my own peace of mind. Not because he deserves it. Carrying anger and hatred only poisons the person holding on to those emotions. David had been released from federal prison 6 months earlier. His sentence reduced for cooperation with ongoing investigations into corporate fraud. He'd attempted to contact Sarah once, through lawyers, requesting visitation with Victoria. Sarah's response had been swift and decisive, supervised visits only, with David paying for court-appointed monitors, and only after he completed extensive therapy for narcissistic personality disorder, David had declined the offer. Apparently, fatherhood wasn't worth the expense or inconvenience when it came with conditions and oversight. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Sarah emphasized to her audience. It doesn't mean dropping our guard or trusting people who've proven themselves untrustworthy. It means refusing to let someone else's toxic behavior poison our own lives. Elena Torres had been sentenced to life without parole, her trial revealing the full scope of her criminal enterprise. She'd victimized at least 12 men over 15 years, stealing millions of dollars and destroying countless families. The women whose husbands had been Elena's targets had formed their own support network, helping each other heal from the trauma of loving men who'd been willing to betray their families for a manipulative stranger. After Sarah's speech, she worked the room, talking individually with women who shared their stories of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and the slow process of rebuilding their lives. Each conversation reminded Sarah of how far she'd come and how much work remained to be done. Sarah. A familiar voice made her turn around. Jessica Park stood behind her, looking healthier and more confident than when they'd first met at the support group. Jonathan Park's daughter had become one of Phoenix Rising's most effective counselors, helping other young adults cope with the aftermath of their parents' financial destruction. Jessica, I'm so glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it. Your speech was incredible. Jessica paused, then added quietly, I think my father would be proud of what we've built from his tragedy. Sarah hugged the younger woman, thinking about the ripple effects of Elena's crimes and how they'd somehow transformed into a force for helping others. Jonathan Park's death hadn't been in vain if it led to preventing other families from suffering the same fate. Later that evening, Sarah sat in the living room of her modest but comfortable house in the Wallingford neighborhood, watching Marcus read Victoria a bedtime story. The toddler was curled up against his chest, her thumb in her mouth as her eyes grew heavy. Mama, Victoria said softly, reaching out her free hand towards Sarah. Sarah joined them on the couch, completing their little family circle. This was happiness, not the desperate, anxious love she'd felt during her marriage to David, but something peaceful and secure and real. She's getting so big, Marcus observed as Victoria's breathing deepened into sleep. Too fast, Sarah agreed. Sometimes I wish I could freeze moments like this. Marcus shifted Victoria carefully, settling her more comfortably against his shoulder. I have something I want to ask you. Sarah looked at him curiously, noting the nervous energy in his voice. I know we've talked about taking things slowly, about not rushing into anything that might disrupt the life you've built for Victoria. Marcus began carefully. But I love you, Sarah. I love both of you. And I want to know if you'd consider letting me become a permanent part of your family. Sarah's heart stopped. Are you proposing? I'm asking if you'd be willing to marry someone whose idea of romance involves background checks and security assessments, Marcus said with a self-deprecating smile. I know I'm not the most traditional choice for a second husband. Sarah thought about the differences between Marcus and David. Where David had been charming and impulsive, Marcus was steady and thoughtful. Where David had demanded that Sarah diminish herself to support his ambitions, Marcus encouraged her to pursue her own goals and dreams. Where David had seen Victoria as an inconvenience, Marcus treated her like a beloved daughter. Yes, Sarah said simply. Marcus blinked in surprise. Yes, just like that. Just like that. Sarah leaned over to kiss him softly, careful not to wake Victoria. I've learned that love doesn't have to be complicated to be real. What we have is good and healthy and strong. Why would I need to overthink that? Marcus smiled, shifting Victoria to one arm so he could pull a small velvet box from his pocket. I was prepared for at least 20 minutes of discussion about timelines and practical considerations. We can discuss practical considerations later. Right now, I just want to say yes to happiness. The engagement ring was simple and elegant, a classic solitaire that caught the light beautifully without being ostentatious. Sarah thought about her first wedding ring, the massive diamond David had chosen to impress his business associates rather than please his bride. This ring was chosen with love rather than ego, and it felt perfect. 6 months later, Sarah and Marcus were married in a small ceremony in Jennifer's backyard, surrounded by family and the community of women who'd become Sarah's chosen sisters. Victoria toddled around in a tiny white dress, charming guests and scattering flower petals with equal enthusiasm. Agent Morrison attended the wedding, along with several other FBI agents who'd become friends during the investigation. Even Maya Chen was there, beaming with pride at Sarah's transformation from broken victim to empowered survivor to thriving advocate. "I'm so proud of you," Jennifer whispered during the ceremony, tears streaming down her face as she watched her sister exchange vows with a man who clearly worshipped her. Sarah's vows were simple but heartfelt. "Marcus, you loved me when I was broken, supported me when I was fighting, and celebrated with me when I was winning. You've shown me that real love doesn't require sacrifice or compromise of self. It requires mutual respect, genuine partnership, and the courage to build something beautiful together." Marcus's vows brought tears to every eye in the audience. "Sarah, you are the strongest woman I've ever known, and raising Victoria with you will be the greatest privilege of my life. I promise to love you both fiercely, protect you always, and never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are." As they kissed to seal their marriage, Victoria clapped from Jennifer's arms, somehow understanding that this was a moment worth celebrating. The reception was held in Sarah's backyard, transformed with white lights and flowers into a fairy tale setting. As Sarah danced with Marcus under the stars, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain of David's betrayal, the terror of Elena's threats, the slow rebuilding of her self-worth. All of it had led to this perfect evening. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked as they swayed to the gentle music. "How grateful I am for everything that happened, even the terrible parts," Sarah replied. "If David hadn't betrayed me, I never would have found my real strength. If Elena hadn't threatened us, I never would have learned how brave I could be, and I never would have met you." "So you're saying I should send David a thank you card?" Sarah laughed, the sound bright and carefree. "Let's not go that far." A year passed in peaceful happiness. Sarah's nonprofit continued to grow, helping women across the country escape financial abuse and rebuild their lives. Marcus had joined the organization as head of security, using his investigative skills to help protect clients from dangerous ex-partners. Victoria was now 2.5, a chatterbox who called Marcus Daddy and had no memory of the chaos that had preceded her birth. She was bright, confident, and completely secure in the love of her family. Sarah was 4 months pregnant with their second child. This pregnancy a joy rather than a source of stress. Marcus attended every appointment, his excitement infectious as they watched their son grow on ultrasound screens. "Have you thought about names?" Marcus asked one evening as they sat in the nursery they were preparing for their son. "I was thinking about Jonathan," Sarah said quietly. "After Jessica's father, to honor all the men who were destroyed by Elena's greed." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Jonathan Chen has a nice ring to it." Life felt perfect, complete in a way Sarah had never experienced during her first marriage. She went to sleep each night feeling safe and loved, woke up each morning excited about the future she was building with Marcus and their children, which was why the package that arrived on a Tuesday morning in spring felt like a bomb exploding in her perfect world. Sarah was alone in the house, Victoria at preschool, and Marcus at the Phoenix Rising offices. The package had no return address, just her name written in block letters that looked deliberately disguised. Inside was a single USB drive and a note. "You need to see this before you trust him completely. A friend who wants to protect you. Sarah stared at the USB drive, her hands trembling slightly. After everything she'd been through, she'd learned to trust her instincts about danger. And right now, every instinct was screaming that this innocent-looking device contained something that would destroy her happiness. She could throw it away, pretend it never arrived. She could show it to Marcus and let him deal with whatever threat it represented, or she could face whatever truth someone wanted her to discover. Sarah inserted the USB drive into her laptop. The files contained hours of audio recordings, all featuring Marcus's voice. Sarah recognized his tone, his speech patterns, his careful way of choosing words, but the content made her blood run cold. "The Sarah Matthews case has been perfect for my research," Marcus was saying to an unknown interviewer. A wealthy woman betrayed by her husband, fighting back against systematic abuse. It's exactly the kind of story that resonates with podcast audiences. Sarah's hands shook as she clicked through more files. "I've documented everything from the beginning. Her breakdown, the investigation, the trial, even her recovery and remarriage. The transformation from victim to survivor to empowered advocate makes for compelling content." Another file. "She trusts me completely now. I'm the hero who helped save her from Elena, the stableman who picked up the pieces David left behind. She has no idea I've been recording our private conversations for over 2 years." Sarah felt sick as the truth became clear. Marcus hadn't fallen in love with her. He'd been studying her, using her trauma as source material for what sounded like a true crime podcast or documentary. The final file was the most devastating. The marriage was perfect for the narrative arc. Showing how Sarah could find love again after such betrayal gives the story a satisfying conclusion. The pregnancy adds another layer, new life emerging from the ashes of her old existence. My audience is going to eat this up. "What about your relationship with her?" the interviewer asked. "Is any of it real?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah's a remarkable woman. I do care about her, and Victoria adores me. But let's be honest, I saw an opportunity to create compelling content while also studying the psychology of trauma recovery up close. It's been invaluable for my research. And she has no idea you've been documenting her private life." "None whatsoever. She thinks I'm just a private investigator who fell in love with his client." The irony is that her trust issues from David's betrayal make her incredibly grateful for what she sees as my loyalty and devotion. She's actually easier to manipulate than someone without her history of abuse. Sarah ripped the headphones off, ran to the bathroom, and vomited until her stomach was empty. The man she'd married, the father figure Victoria adored, the partner she was building a future with, he was just another predator wearing a different mask. Marcus had been documenting her most private moments, her therapy sessions, her fears about motherhood, her slowly rebuilt confidence. He'd recorded conversations during their most intimate moments, treating her recovery like a research project. She thought about the USB drive's mysterious sender. Who wanted her to know the truth, and why now, when she was pregnant with Marcus's child and Victoria saw him as her father? Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Home early today. Taking Victoria to the park after I pick her up from school. Love you." Love. The word felt like poison now. Marcus didn't love her. He loved the story she represented, the content she provided for his entertainment and career advancement. Sarah stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her hand unconsciously moving to her pregnant belly. Once again, she was carrying a child whose father had been deceiving her all along. Once again, she trusted a man who saw her as useful rather than beloved. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't the naive woman who'd given up everything for love. She was Sarah Matthews Chen, survivor of financial abuse, destroyer of criminal conspiracies, and protector of women everywhere. Marcus thought he was documenting her story, but he was about to discover that the story wasn't over yet, and this time, she would be writing the ending. As Sarah heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway, followed by Victoria's excited chatter, she made a decision that would change everything once again. The USB drive disappeared into her safe, alongside copies of all the financial documents from David's case. Mommy Victoria burst through the front door, launching herself into Sarah's arms. Daddy said we can have ice cream if you say yes. Sarah looked at Marcus over their daughter's head, seeing him clearly for the first time. The concerned expression, the devoted husband act, the careful way he watched her reactions. It was all performance, all data collection for his real project. Of course we can have ice cream, sweetheart, Sarah said, her voice perfectly normal despite the rage building in her chest. Marcus smiled, completely unaware that his secret had been exposed. How was your day, honey? Enlightening, Sarah replied, returning his smile with interest. Absolutely enlightening. As they walked to the kitchen together, Sarah began planning her next move. Marcus thought he was the hunter, documenting the prey, but he was about to learn that some prey evolved into predators. The game was about to begin again, and this time, Sarah held all the cards. Victoria's laughter filled the house as Marcus scooped ice cream into bowls, completely oblivious to the storm gathering around him. Sarah placed her hand on her pregnant belly, silently promising her unborn son that he would never grow up thinking it was acceptable to exploit the women who loved him. The phoenix was about to rise again, and this time the flames would consume everything built on lies.